All right. Today's week 19 of our chronological study, and this section today, I'm going to be looking at 2 Samuel, chapters 13 and a few past that. This is on the heels in Scripture, and we're not going to talk about the one most famous thing David's known for. We're not going to talk about it. We will go back and pull one little piece of it in a few minutes to kind of tie it together. But what's the most famous thing David's known for in Scripture?
Killing Goliath.
Nope.
You said we started with
Bathsheba, and his whole thing with Bathsheba, right? So we're 2 Samuel chapter 13. Chapter 12 has part of the whole Bathsheba thing. We're going to come back. But what takes place from what we're looking at today is after that event, so down in the corridor of time, it's several years past this. Let me kind of introduce you to a couple of characters that we're going to be talking about. One, the guy's name is Ammon. He's David's firstborn son. Okay, he's born in Hebron before they ever end up going and moving to Jerusalem. But he is David's firstborn son. Now, with that, in the normal progression of royalty, okay, the firstborn son would mostly be the one that would be the crown prince. Meaning he's the one that is expected to ascend to the throne when his father's gone. Okay, so he would be most likely candidate to be the crown prince. So that would be a natural position for him based on just where he's at. Now we're going to get to see him a little bit more in a minute. Another guy is Absalom. Okay, Absalom. Most commentaries seem to agree. Absalom was probably David's favorite son, at least up to this point in time. Okay, he's probably, a lot of it is, he's probably the most like David of any of the other ones. Okay, he's good looking, he's smart, people love him. In the day of Saul, when David was in there working for Saul, who did the people love? David. Here's David as king, and who do the people love? Absalom. Okay, so he's got a strong sense of justice, although it starts to get a little twisted. Okay, and then he does seem to be very protective of his family. Okay, we're going to see that. Now he's got a sister. Sister's name's Tamar. Okay, we're going to talk about her in just a minute too. But she's Absalom's full sister, and well, she's going to end up getting raped by her brother. Okay, and so there's where you're going to see some of the justice as well as the protectiveness of Absalom come out. So then a couple other people, and we've already talked about them. We already know about David, and then Joab is one of the other key players. We're going to talk about Joab and David at the end, really from more of a leadership standpoint. But let's jump in here in 2 Samuel chapter 13. Some time passed. David's son Absalom had a beautiful sister named Tamar, and David's son Ammon, the firstborn, was infatuated with her. Ammon was frustrated to the point of making himself sick over his sister Tamar because she was a virgin, but it seemed impossible to do anything to her. What do we have here? We've got the crown prince. We've got the guy who's probably the closest to David. He is the assistant executive director, if you will. He is the closest in line. He should be most concerned with the day-to-day affairs of running the kingdom. Okay? But what he seems to have is he's moved beyond just lust. He's moved into a complete full-blown addiction, sexual addiction. Because it says here, he's getting himself sick over it. He's thinking, look, this is pre-internet, so it's not like this is pornography, but look, your mind works, right? It's kind of its own reel. It's a movie theater in there. Okay? And so whatever he's been doing, okay, and it doesn't just end up, this is his first time. that this shows up, there's something that's been feeding this, and he's gotten himself where he's looking at his half-sister and it's making him sick. He's thinking and dwelling on it so much. It is starting to consume him. Okay? Ammon, verse 3, had a friend named Jonadab. I would tell you, I don't think it's really a good description to call him a friend. But he's got a friend. He's also a cousin, son of David's brother Shimea. Jonadab was a very shrewd man, meaning he was a smart guy, a little manipulative, smart guy. And he asked Ammon, "Why are you, the king's son, so miserable every morning? Won't you tell me?" See, this is an every morning thing. He comes out, and he's what? He's sick. There's something mentally there. I mean, he should be focused on his daily duties, but he's what? He's gotten himself so deep into this lust, into this addiction, that it's consuming him. Okay, and it's consuming him to the point where he's not doing his other duties. He's just dwelling on this. Now, I would tell you that this friend probably would better be called a co-conspirator in a criminal activity, okay, than a friend. So the friend, the co-conspirator here, has a plan. Ammon replied, "I'm in love with Tamar, my brother Absalom's sister." I would also tell you that love here is probably more in I'm in lust and I'm in full-bore addiction. And I'm wanting to feed my addiction. Verse 5, Jonadab said to him, "Lie down on your bed and pretend you're sick. When your father," who's his father? The king. "When your father, the king, comes to see you, say to him, 'Please let my sister Tamar come and give me something to eat. Let her prepare a meal in my presence so I can watch and eat from her hand.'" This is their plan. Okay? This is the co-conspirator's idea. And the one that's got the addiction goes, "That's a great idea." Okay? The friend, the co-conspirator here, think about it. He is trying to help the other one do what? Manipulate the king. Not just daddy, the king. Okay? So manipulate the king in what? To help him rape the king's daughter. I mean, honestly, if there's any time that the death penalty should be administered, you would think this is your worst chance of having it happen right here. Okay? You've got a co-conspirator. And of course, he thinks it's a great idea. Verse 6, so Ammon lay down and pretended to be sick. When the king came to see him, Ammon said to him, "Please let my sister Tamar come and make a couple of cakes in my presence so I can eat it from her hand." Look, that should have made King David go, "What? You're sick, I come to see you, and you want me to get your half-sister to come make food for you while you see it so you can watch her?" That ought to make any dude go, "You lost your mind. What? But the king he's so preoccupied at this point with whatever he's doing that it never seems to cross his mind that he's got a problem. Okay? So what does he do? He sent word to Tamar at the palace, "Please go to your brother Ammon's house, prepare a meal for him." David should have asked questions. There should have been something there. But David missed it. Why? David's, not only is he king, shepherd over Israel, he's also shepherd and protector over his household. Okay? And he's not doing a real good job at paying attention. Okay? So, verse 8. When Tamar went to his house while Ammon was lying down, she took kneaded and made cakes in his presence and baked them. Now skip down to verse 11. When she brought them to him to eat, he grabbed her and said, "Come, sleep with me, my sister." And what does she do? She says, "Don't, my brother," she cried. "Don't disgrace me, for such a thing should never be done in Israel." It should never be done anywhere. But Israel, God had set up the law of Moses, and he had specific stuff that said this should not happen in God's land, period. Okay? And it was the king that was supposed to be overseeing all this. And he's already not done a very good job at making sure his household's protected. He's not asking the right questions when something has to seem kind of strange. Okay? And so she's saying what? Stop. This should never happen in Israel. Don't commit this outrage. Where could I ever go with my humiliation? Can you imagine? She's the king's daughter. She's a virgin. She's being what? She's being attacked. And she's trying her best to get him to stop. Where could I go with my humiliation? And you? Would you be like one of the outrageous fools in Israel? You're supposed to be royalty. You're supposed to be in the king's house. You're supposed to be doing and living and walking in justice according to God's law, because you're probably the next in line to be the king. Are you wanting to walk like a common fool out there and do this stuff? She's trying her best to talk to him, but guess what? He's not hearing a thing. Why? The addiction's going on. He's in full-bore addiction, and he's made a plan, and he's going right on through with it. Please speak to the king, for he won't keep me from you. I think this is probably just a way she's trying to what? Make him think, king, daddy, king, stop. If you'll go talk to him, that'll put some distance here. If you'll go talk to him, he would. Here's the thing. Bible doesn't say, but I'm pretty sure that David probably would not have gone through with that. Because according to the law, according to God's word, that wasn't supposed to happen. Leviticus, marrying a brother and a half-sister, that sort of stuff, wasn't supposed to take place. Okay? So I don't think, according to God's word, that David would have gone through with that. I think this is a way trying to what? Get a little distance out there. Okay? But, verse 14, he refused to listen to her. And because he was stronger than she was, he disgraced her by raping her. His lust, his what? Gone all the way out. His addiction, sexual addiction, has caused him, he's not listening to anything. He's made a plan, and he's gone. And this is, look, this is planned. This is not, we'll see in a minute. I think this is violent. This ain't just, hey, sleep with me. This is a violent deal. He's stronger than her. This is violence against her. Okay? Verse 15. So Ammon hated Tamar with such intensity that he hated her was great. The hate that he hated her with was greater than the love he had for her. And he told her, get out of here. There was no love. This was lust. This was violence. And the moment that his violence, the violence that he did, there was coming out of anger. That's coming out of aggression and stuff. But once he's done this, what has he done? Now, there's no love. There's no concern. It was what? The hate's changed, or his feelings have changed from anger and violence to now hate. Okay? And he's telling her what? Get out of here. And she cries, no, sending me away now is much worse than the great wrong that you've already done to me. See, he should have, at this point, she's like, you've humiliated me. Now you need to keep me and you need to live up to your end of the bargain. But he's not going that way. He's like, no, you're a piece of meat. You get out of here. I've done my thing. I'm done. We're gone. You're out of here. Okay? This is violence. But he refused to listen to her. Instead, listen what he says. He called the servant who waited on him. Get this away from me. Throw her out. Get this away from me. She's not even on the level of prostitute at this moment. This is just what? This was feeding the addiction, and once it's fed, what? Discarding it. Laying waste to it. This was violence, this is humiliation, and this was him feeding his own desires that he's built up, and then what? Using her in a violent manner and then kick her out. Throw her out. Get this away from me, throw her out, and bolt the door behind her. Ammon's servant threw her out, bolted the door behind her. Now Tamar was wearing a long-sleeved garment because this is what the king's virgin daughters wore. King's virgin daughters, what? They weren't out there flaunting stuff. What? They were dressed nice. They were dressed appropriately. They were dressed in such a way that everybody knew, right? And here's the king's daughter who ought to be able to walk around Jerusalem, what? Protected and safe. Okay? And she does what? She puts ashes on her head. She tore the long sleeve garment she was wearing. She put her hand on her head and went away crying. Okay? Because of what her brother, her half-brother's done to her. So once he's finally raped her, he's fed that appetite. He wants nothing else to do with the rage. The rage that caused the rape is now turned to anger against her. She's the victim, but she's being, I mean, it's not stopping, is it? She's now the victim of that side of it. Okay? Now, her brother Absalom said to her, "Has your brother Ammon been with you? Be quiet for now, my sister. He's your brother. Don't take this thing to heart." I don't know how you could not take that thing to heart. Okay? So Tamar lived as a desolate woman in the house of her brother Absalom. Here's that protective side. Here's that man that's protect. He's what? She's no longer walking around. She's tore her clothes. She's no longer walking around Israel. She should be a picture of a godly woman in Israel in the king's family, and instead she's not. She's living as a desolate woman who's been humiliated, who's been violence done against her, and she's sitting here, what? Living in his house. You got Absalom protecting her and taking care of her and watching over her. So here's that side of him that's protective. Now, verse 21. When King David heard about all these things, he was furious. That sounds good to start with, don't it? He's furious. But he does nothing. He does nothing. Absalom didn't say anything to Ammon, either good or bad, because he hated Ammon since he disgraced his sister Tamar. He wasn't talking to him. Look. He wasn't going to argue with him, and he wasn't saying a word. Somebody who's not talking at all is usually plotting. People that are talking, there's communication going on. People that aren't talking, no, they're plotting stuff. Okay? And so, here's Absalom, here's Tamar waiting on their father David to provide justice. And he's doing nothing. Ammon, who's the crown prince, who's the firstborn, who committed this horrible thing in the land of Israel, in David's own household, and David's doing nothing. Okay? Doing nothing. Verse 23, 2 years later. All right, so I think for part of this 2 years, Absalom was sitting there waiting to see what David was going to do. And then eventually he was like, not going to do anything. So then the remainder of the time, Absalom's been working a plan. Okay? Now look, David, as the king, is supposed to be providing justice and safety in the land. And he's got the law of God. He knows what's supposed to be taking place. And he's not doing it. Oh, by the way, you know what the penalty for all that was? According to the law of God? Mom was supposed to be dead. Okay? You have that in play. You also got something else that's in play that makes this a little tricky. Okay? You've got the thing of the kinsman redeemer. And you've got this one person that has the ability to go and make right a wrong done. Okay? But in the time that we're talking about, David should have been the one handling those affairs. Okay? But he's not doing this. Okay? So poor leadership from the king over the kingdom and over his family. He's not handling what he should do. Okay. Now, Absalom is waited 2 years on his revenge. Verse 23, 2 years later, Absalom's sheep shearers are getting ready for them to shear sheep. And the sheep shearing process is that's a tongue twister, is a festive time that people would get together and it would be like a big party. Okay? And so what's he going to do? Absalom's got a plan. And he's going to invite all the brothers, including Daddy, the king. And they're all going to come. He's going to invite all of them for this big festival. Now look, Absalom knows how the management of the government works. Okay? He invites Daddy and all the brothers. Okay? He also knows that it's not wise and the king will not come if everybody's together. It's kind of like now. If you've got the president and the vice president on the same plane and the plane goes down, you got a problem. They don't travel together. In case something happens, you've got the backup plan. Okay? David and them know this, and we'll see it. David's going to say it here in just a second. Okay? But he knows that David's not going to come. Look at verse 25. Okay? He's asked him if he'll come. The king replied to Absalom, "No, my son, we should not all go." We shouldn't all be there. We're going to be a burden to you anyway, but we shouldn't all be there. We shouldn't all be there together. Okay? Although Absalom urged him, he wasn't willing to go, but he did bless him. It's part of the plan. He knows he's not coming. If not, Absalom said, "Please let my brother of mine go with us." Why did he pick him? Because he's already invited all the rest of them. Because what this is as the crown prince, he would be the official representative from the king. He would be guaranteed. If David can get him to say, "Okay, I won't come, but I'll send a representative," that's going to by default put Amon there. And he's got a plan for Amon. Okay? And so he's the official representation, because even the king, why should I let him go with you? But he keeps on urging him, so he finally lets him go with the rest of the sons as the official representative. Now what's he got? He's got a plan. Hey, we're going to get him liquored up good. And then when he's liquored up real good, I got some guys that are going to jump him and they're going to kill him. Now they're going to kill nobody else. Hurt nobody else. Just him. Why? Revenge. Okay? He's the one, had David have done what he was supposed to do, they'd have left it alone. But he's the one that's the closest in family, and he's going to be the avenger of blood. Okay? Again, there's a little issue there. David should have been handling it, but the avenger of blood's still an issue. I said something else a minute ago, didn't I? Not the avenger of blood. I said the kinsman redeemer. But the avenger, the family avenger was the one that that was still in the law. That's still in place. And so what's he doing? He's going to avenge his sister's violent rape that she's done that Daddy didn't handle. Okay? Now, what's going to happen is after he kills him, he's going to flee. Look at the last verse of verse 37, chapter 13, verse 37. But Absalom fled and went to Ptolemy, son of whatever that is, king of Geshur. And David mourned for his son every day. Okay? He's the grandson. Absalom's the grandson of this king. He's got the ability to go over here to this king. Okay? So he's going into exile. After Absalom had fled to Geshur and had been there for 3 years, the king longed to go to Absalom, for David had finished grieving over Amon's death. Okay? The law of God said that Amon should have been put to death. David didn't handle it. Absalom does kill him, but now he flees and goes off into exile. Okay? Now, here's the thing. Remember I said I think David probably liked He was probably closest and liked Absalom the most out of them. Here he is after all this. Now he's had to mourn his oldest son, who was the crown prince, who's dead. But he's still what? He's still got this longing for his son, who did it, who's off in another land. He's been over there for 3 years. Here's the thing. I don't think David knew what to do. So instead of doing anything, he did nothing. Okay? And sometimes that's the worst thing you can do. In fact, a lot of times that's the worst thing you can do. Okay? But I don't think he knew what to do. And so in the process, it's eating at the king, but I can also bet you it's probably eating at Absalom. Daddy's not reached out to me. I'm over here. Okay? So chapter 14, Joab comes up with a plan. And Joab's got a plan to try to get the two of them back together. Now look, it's about a 50-50 split on what people believe is the real reason why Joab's wanting to do this. But Joab comes with a plan. And some of them believe that Joab's probably looking at King David and going, you know what, because of all this and him longing for his son, he's not doing a real good job at administering the nation, his kingdom. And so I need to get him back over here and see if I can fix this so we can move on. That's one possibility. The other possibility is I think that because the people liked Absalom so much, if you could restore that relationship, that builds your power and your credibility in the nation, which Joab's all about. His strength and his power inside the kingdom. What exactly and why, I don't know, but he does go and put together this plan. So David does allow him to come. But here's the thing. I tell you what, chapter 14, verse 23. So Joab got up, went to Geshur, and brought Absalom to Jerusalem. However, the king added, he may return to his house, but he may not see my face. So Absalom returned to his house, but he did not see the king. Can't see his face. That would be like God telling you, okay, you can come back into the fold, but you can never see my face. That'd be like you going into heaven one day, and who do you expect to see face to face? You expect to see Jesus, right? Face to face. But you'd be like being told, okay, you can come, but you can't see my face. That's the level of what? You're saying you can come back and you can live in your house, but we're having no relationship. And again, why is David doing that? I think because he's longed for him, I think David doesn't know what to do. And he's apparently not going, hey God, what do I do about this? But he doesn't know how to handle this relationship. So instead of doing anything, he does nothing. Yeah, you can come. You can be back in the household. You can be over there in your house, but you can't see me face to face. Okay? You can't come in. There's no restoration there. Yeah, I'm letting you back in, but there's no restoration there. But I think that Absalom's looking for restoration with his father, who they're very much alike. And he's looking for it and he's seeking it. But what happens if you look for something and you seek for it and you never get it? Does it make you mad? Sure it will. What does he do? He's tried to get Joab to come and go to the king. Okay? This has gone on for 2 years. He tries to get Joab. Joab's like, hey, I got you back in the land, but I don't want to get any farther involved. So finally, Absalom gets fed up with it, and he sends people over there, and they burn Joab's fields. They get your attention real fast. Joab shows up. Look at verse 32. Look, Absalom explained to Joab, I sent for you and said, come here. I want to send you to the king to ask, why have I come back from Geshur? I'd be better off if I were still there. So now let me see the king. If I am guilty, let him kill me. I want restoration. I want to see the king. If I'm guilty, let him kill me. Guess what? He's not really guilty. I think because if you look at the avenger of blood aspect, David didn't do his part. I think you can make the argument that he did what was according to the law he could have done. The other thing that goes with this as well as with Ammon, why does David not confront Ammon, and why can Absalom go before his father and he's not guilty, so he's not going to die? It's hard for David to judge and be the judge in this when he's guilty of all those exact same things. There you go. David, look, the Bible doesn't say he raped her, but she's another man's wife. And, it's not the neighbor that's trying to coerce her over. This is the king who's in charge of it all. Says, come on over. Okay? My guess is she can't put up much of a fight there. Now, when he gets her pregnant, what does he do? He then tries to get him to what? Go sleep with his wife, so he thinks that the baby's his. The problem is the guy, Uriah, is way more honorable than the king. And he's like, my guys are out there fighting. I'm not going to go in here and go have pleasure with my wife when my men are out there at battle. He's much more honorable than David is at that moment. So what does David do? David presents what? A plan for murder. Who carries it out? Joab. Okay? David's taken a man's wife, and David's murdered somebody. It's hard for him to go and say, you know what, Absalom, you did wrong in killing your brother. It's hard for him to go to Ammon and present justice to him when he's guilty of the same similar thing, isn't it? Moral of the story, if you're going to deal with stuff, and you've got to what? You got to walk the walk. Okay? You got to walk the walk. Or it's real, real hard to what? Administer fairness and justice if you're not doing it. And that's got David in a problem. Okay? It's hard to rule as king and judge over Israel when you're just as guilty as everybody else. Okay? So, David finally allows him to come in. Verse 33, Joab went to the king and told him. So David summoned Absalom, who came to the king and paid homage with his face to the ground before him, and the king kissed him. When the king kissed him, that's what? That's an act of restoration. Okay? He could have what? Told him to carry him away and kill him. But he doesn't. He kisses him. It's restoration. Problem is, the anger has already festered up inside. Okay? Now, again, I don't think David knew what to do, so he did nothing. Look, they say time heals all wounds, right? And if somebody's, if there's forgiveness and repentance, then time can heal wounds, right? But if there is injustice, and there's not forgiveness, and there's not repentance, time just festers that wound, not heals the wound. There's multiple wounds going on here, okay? And I think you've had Absalom sitting back. He was already not happy with what Daddy didn't do. And then Daddy left him over there. And then when Daddy brings him back, Daddy lets him sit over there. You can't see my face for 2 years. I think David, in David's defense, I think David doesn't know what to do, so he does nothing. But I think what happens is on Absalom's side, he sits back and sees the doing nothing, and he takes offense to it. Instead of looking at it going, he don't know how to deal with it, he's thinking what? He hates me. He's doing this on purpose, and anger starts to build. Look, I guarantee we're all guilty of that, right? If you've ever wronged somebody or you've been wronged, is there not certain people that you kind of standoffish from? And sometimes it's really from I don't know what to do with it, right? There's nothing ill intent, but guess what? The other person's reading over time. You're doing this on purpose. It's ill intent. And they get what? Next thing you know, they start to what? Play the victim. Right? And when they start to play the victim, what? Then they get angry. Okay? But the other person may just not know what to do with it. and just kind of like stands back, and I don't know. I think that's what's probably happening here from David. But Absalom, it's made him mad. And he's already proved he can think a plan out and carry it out for a number of years before he finishes it out. And that's exactly what he's going to do here. Okay? Now, David's lack of compassion for Absalom, his lack of compassion for his Tamar, his daughter, his lack of justice has caused this to rise up in Absalom. And Absalom's now got himself, by getting kissed by the king, he's got himself back into the royal court. See, all the king's sons have a job inside the government. Okay? They're all princes. They all have stuff as part of what he's doing. He's got himself back in. He's not just living back in Jerusalem. He's got himself back into his job. So what does he do? Look at, he's got a plan. Chapter 15. After this, Absalom got himself a chariot, horses, and 50 men to run before him. What's that look like? That he's in a chariot and they're going out. Look, I'm back. Right? Did the people love him already? Sure they did. I'm back. Okay? He's back. He would get up early and stand beside the road leading to the city gate. When anyone had a grievance to bring before the king for settlement, Absalom called out to him and asked, "What city are you from?" If he replied, "Your servant is from one of the tribes of Israel," Absalom said to him, "Look, your claims are good and right, but the king does not have anyone to listen to you." But the people were coming, if you had a grievance, and this has gone down through time with kings and stuff. When you had a grievance against, and you needed somebody, y'all remember the story of even Solomon, the two women and the one baby, they brought that before the king, right? So if you had a grievance, if you had something going on, you would bring your case before the king, and he would hear it out and he'd make a judgment. Okay? But as anything, when the entity starts to get bigger, one person can't do it all. Moses found that out. Okay? And he had to what? He had to get people to help him. The king, as the kingdom goes from a little bitty tiny thing to big, the king can't go sit at the gate and listen to every single person's grievances. Okay? So he would normally have somebody there. Who's going to take that role? Absalom shows up to take the role. Why? He's got a plan. He's got a plan. Because look, the people know the king is busy, right? But let's just talk reality. Do the clients know that you're busy? Do they care? They know you're busy. They don't care. Why? Because each person's what? Living in their own movie, right? So they're in their own movie. Whether you're busy or not, it's not a concern of theirs. All they know is if they want you and you're not there, you're not there. So here's Absalom. He slides into that spot. And he's taken that position. He says, "If only someone would appoint me judge in the land, then anyone who had a grievance or dispute could come to me, and I would make sure he receives justice." Look, that's what people wanted, right? And what? He's down there face to face, the level with what? With the people. Okay? They already like him. So, he's sliding himself into that role. When a person approached to pay homage to him, Absalom reached out his hand, took hold of him, and kissed him. That's personal. It wasn't like the king. You can't get to the king. He's got armed guards up there. He's sitting up there. You know, even in their mind, maybe they sit there and see him just kind of sitting there going, "Don't touch me." Right? But they come to him, and Absalom's at the gate, and they come to him, and when they come over to him, he doesn't just go, "Who y'all are?" He does what? He reaches out, and he takes a hold, and it's personal touch. Guess what he's doing? He's building a rapport with those folks. Okay? By the way, Absalom would make a perfect politician. Perfect politician. Why? Because, look, a politician that already has their office, and they've got their office and they want it and they're sitting up there, if you go with the complaint, you'll be lucky to even get in the front door. They're not going to give you the time of day. But if they are campaigning, they will listen to everything you got to say face to face, shake your hand, give you a hug, kiss you baby, all that stuff, right? Until they get their office. Okay? What's he doing? He's down there working with the people because he ultimately knows the only way you can overthrow anything is you got to have the people backing you. Okay? Absalom did this. Look, he did this to all Israel who came to the king for settlement. So Absalom stole the hearts of the men of Israel. See, David, the people loved David, and he never acted out to go take the kingdom, did he? Absalom, on the other hand, is what? He's working on trying to figure out a way to what? Steal the kingdom. And he's where at? He's at the grassroots level dealing with the people. Okay? He's not stupid. He's really not. This is a smart guy. Okay? Now, what's he going to do? Eventually, he's going to have an uprising. Chapter 15, verse 13, an informer came to David and reported the hearts of the men of Israel are with Absalom. What that really means is Absalom has got himself a little army. He's got a lot of people with him, and you got a problem, king. He's coming to take over. David said to all the servants with him in Jerusalem, "Get up, we have to flee, or we will not escape from Absalom. Leave quickly, or he will overtake us quickly, heap disaster on us, and strike the city with the edge of the sword." David's leaving is trying to save the city and all that. From Absalom shows up. Absalom's coming. He's going to come with a small army. Now that has to make you go, well, where's David and his army? David's got over a kingdom. His army's not in the city. His army's where? They're all out scattered all across his nation. In all different places. Look, you don't have satellites and radios, and you can't just go call in an airstrike. You can't go get them over there all of a sudden. It takes time to get your army pulled back together. So there's not a good chance of him fighting. If you stand in the city and try to battle it out, you're going to die. And so's a lot of people. So David leaves the city. The king's servant said to the king, verse 15, "Whatever my lord the king decides, we are your servants." Then the king set out. His entire household followed him. But he left behind 10 concubines to take care of the palace. Now, why did he leave them? Or who are they? These are wives, but they're lesser wives. Okay? How exactly that works, I don't know. I don't have the Middle Eastern mind to be able to understand that. Okay? But they're wives, but they're lesser wives. But he leaves these 10 to stay there and to take care of the palace while he's gone. Which means he's probably thinking he's coming back at some point, right? Okay. But he's left them there to take care of the household. That's going to be important in just a minute. Skip over to verse 31. Someone reported to David, Ahithophel, I don't know, is among the conspirators with Absalom. Who is he? He was one of David's most trusted consultants. Okay? And David turns around. It's reported that he's one of the conspirators, and David turns around and pleads with the Lord. "Lord, please turn the counsel of Ahithophel into foolishness." Okay? Now, we're going to read it, but one of the other counselors is going to come up. David's going to say, "Hey, why don't you go back to the city and you can help counteract what this guy's going to do." And God's going to use that to do exactly that. Okay? Now, chapter 16, verse 20. Then Absalom said to Ahithophel, "Give me your advice on what we should do." And he replied to Absalom, "Sleep with your father's concubines, whom he left to take care of the palace." It's weird, right? When all Israel hears that you have what you've done, it will become repulsive to your father, and everyone with you will be encouraged. They'll all be encouraged because what they'll think is because you've done this, David's going to have Nothing but anger for you. There won't be a restoration. But right now, if you don't, what there is you might sit up there and eventually work out a peace agreement. Okay, and the king takes back over, and what could happen to all those people that followed Absalom? Dead because they all were traitors. But if you do this, the people are going to know David's going to hate you. Now, why is this important? Back up to the whole thing with Bathsheba. Back up to chapter 12. Chapter 12, verse 9. God's talking here. Why then have you despised the Lord's command by doing what I consider evil? You struck down Uriah the Hittite with the sword and took his wife as your own wife. Uh-oh. You murdered him with the Ammonite sword. Now, therefore, the sword will never leave your house. Oh, by the way, has it left his house? No. It's there, right? And he's not quite done in our story just yet. Because you despised me and took the wife of Uriah the Hittite to be your own. And then he says this. This is what the Lord says. I am going to bring disaster on you from your own family. I will take your wives and give them to another before your very eyes. And he will sleep with them in broad daylight. You acted in secret, but I will do this before all Israel in broad daylight. This is God talking. Okay. And then what's the advice he's been given years later? Do just that. Okay. By doing this, this is to what? This is to hurt David. Okay? And God's already predicted this is going to take place. Okay? Because of what? What you did with Bathsheba. You killed Uriah and you took his wife. Because of what you did. Look, was he forgiven? Yeah. Were the consequences changed? No. The consequences are still there. Okay? Consequences didn't change. Verse 22, back in chapter 16 again. So they pitched a tent for Absalom on the roof, and he slept with his father's concubines in the sight of all Israel. Can you see it? The palace is sitting high up on the hill. And right out there on the top of the palace where everybody in Jerusalem can see, they go put a tent up, and they start marching one of them at a time. Right on, everybody's watching. They know what's going on with who? David's concubines, David's wives. Think that's an insult to David? Okay. Sure it is. Consequence of what? His sin with Bathsheba. It included murder. Okay. So that's got fulfilled in that whole little thing. Now, go over to chapter 18. Even though, well, he gets out there, he gets off, finally gets some time and distance. Joab and the rest of the army catches up to David, and now they're ready. And Absalom's going to come out thinking he's going to come attack David and kill him. And what he finds out is David and his men are absolute warriors. Okay? So they're going to come out. But look at verse 5, 18 verse 5. The king commanded Joab, Abishai, and whatever, Itha. Okay? These are the three commanders. Okay? Over these three divisions of the army. Treat the young man Absalom gently for my sake. So what's he telling them? Don't kill him. Okay? Don't kill him. Treat the young man Absalom gently for my sake. All the people heard the king's orders to all the commanders about Absalom. The king issued an order, don't kill Absalom. Pretty straightforward, right? Then David's forces marched into the field to engage Israel in battle, which took place in the forest of Ephraim. Israel's army was defeated by David's soldiers, and the slaughter there was very vast that day. 20,000 dead, The battle spread over the entire area, and that day the forest claimed more people than the sword. I don't know, but I kind of think what might have been in the forest might have been God's army sitting in the forest. Okay? The forest claimed more than the army did, the earthly army. Okay? Was this one of those things where, hey, take it around back and wait till you hear the army in the trees? Okay? Maybe so. Absalom was riding on his mule when he happened to meet David's soldiers. When the mule went under tangled branches of the large oak tree, Absalom's head was caught fast in the tree. The mule kept going under him, and he was suspended in midair. Now you know why the military, they shaved their heads. True story. So you can't grab it. You grab somebody's hair, what do? You can sling them around. Okay. One of the men saw him and informed Joab. He said, I just saw Absalom hanging in an oak tree. He ain't dead. He's just hanging there. He's stuck. And Joab says, you just saw him? Why didn't you strike him to the ground right there? But didn't Joab have orders? I would have given you 10 pieces of silver and a belt. Here's a guy that's way more honorable than Joab. The man replied to Joab, even if I had the weight of 1,000 pieces of silver in my hand, I would not raise my hand against the king's sons. For we heard the king command you, Abishai and Ithiah, to protect the young man Absalom for me. We all heard him give you an order. Okay? And then this guy knows a little bit more about who Joab is. If I had jeopardized my own life and nothing is hidden from the king, you would have abandoned me. Push came to shove, you'd have left me out to dry. I'd have been the one paying the price for Absalom. You would have left me out there. You know, nothing irritates me more than when you deal with something and somebody starts to get in trouble and the one who really called the shot won't step up and say, hey, that was my deal. I hate that. I see them in text messages all the time. It starts going, I go, whoa, hang on. I made the call. Oh, you know what? I can deal with that. But when the person that's made the call sits over there and goes, and just lets the other person get reamed on because they won't step up, I think that's exactly what this guy was afraid of what Joab would do to him, and it cost him his life. He knows that Joab's character is a little bit shaky. Okay? Now, what's he going to do? He's going to go and Joab's going to take a couple of guys and they're going to go over there and they're going to kill Absalom. Okay? And then what are they going to do? They're going to actually go take him, throw him in a pit, throw a bunch of rocks over the top of him to bury him that way. And they're really dishonoring him because you remember what happened with Saul's family? What did they do? They went and got the body of the king's sons and all of them and they treated them. Remember, David was very pleased with how they had treated well the king's family in death and in burial. They don't do that with Absalom. They intentionally throw him in a pit and cover him up. Don't even allow him to have proper burial with the family. Okay? Now, the end of 18 and first and 19, the king was deeply moved and went up to his chamber above the city gate and wept. Why? Absalom's dead. As he walked, he cried, my son Absalom, my son Absalom, my son Absalom. If only I had died instead of you, Absalom, my son. All David had to do to fulfill that was just stay still. They would have killed him. It would have been no big deal. It would have been over with, right? He's now what? He left, but now that Absalom's dead, he's what? He's gone into a state of mourning. Okay? The problem is, he's the king. Okay? And as the king, he's making a mistake. Because this is somebody who tried to lead an uprising against you from a traitor standpoint, and you've got men who went to battle for you to protect you. It was reported, chapter 19, it was reported Joab, the king is weeping. He's mourning over Absalom. That day's victory turned into mourning for all the troops, because on that day the troops heard the king is grieving over his son. Should have been a victorious day for those guys, and what is it? It's not. Okay. Verse 3, so they returned to the city quietly that day, like troops coming in when they were humiliated after fleeing in a battle. They came back in victory, but yet they're humiliated like they were cowards and left the battlefield. That don't go over real well for warriors. It doesn't. Okay? But the king covered his face and cried loudly, my son Absalom, my son Absalom. Verse 5, then Joab went into the house of the king. I guarantee you, most people wouldn't have the guts nor the ability to march right on into the king's room. I don't think anybody stood in Joab's way. My guess is he looked like a man on a mission. If you get in my way, I'll kill you. He marched right on into the palace, right on up to the king. And look what he said. Today you have shamed all your soldiers, those who saved your life, as well as your sons, your wives, and your concubines. You've shamed all those who just protected you by loving your enemies and hating those who love you. Today you have made it clear the commanders and soldiers mean nothing to you. In fact, today I know that if Absalom were alive and all of us were dead, it would be fine with you. The only way for Absalom at this point to have survived this was all of them would have had to been dead. And he's going, based on the way you're acting, you would have been okay if we were dead and we didn't go to our families, but you had Absalom back. He's not real happy. And honestly, he's got the right to be. Verse 7, now get up. Can't you hear him? Get up. And I think David knew exactly that he meant business. Because see, Joab's gained a lot of power. And when you run the army, there's a level of power there. And the guys like you. And right now, they don't like you, David. Get up. Go out and encourage your soldiers, for I swear by the Lord that if you don't go out, not a man will remain with you tonight. This will be worse for you than all the trouble that has come to you from your youth until now. And the king got up. This ain't if you don't get up, it might go bad. If you don't get up and go handle this now, by this evening, you won't have an army. You will have all of them out there will want your head. Okay? You better get up and you better go out there and handle yourself as a king and get out of your own feelings. Look, as a leader, if you're having problems in your personal life as a leader, you can't bring that and deal with the people you're leading. Honestly, they don't care. Again, they're playing their own movie. Okay? You've got to act the right way. And David, who's not only the king, he's the head of it all. And these guys all just went and risked their lives for him. And he's over there weeping for the enemy. Okay? And so get up and do what you're supposed to do. Now, Joab is right. Okay? He's a leader. He really is. He knows how to lead. And he knows how to lead these guys. He also knows how the king's supposed to be handling this type of stuff and what it could mean. Now, so let's look for just a second on the leadership side of it. David's a great leader of men when he's paying attention to the role. Okay? The problem is, the farther you go up the chain of command and the wider and bigger it gets, you have a tendency to get sloppy. David got sloppy. Okay? He wasn't down there in the trenches where all the folks were. Absalom was. He wasn't working with his leaders and his own family because, we already know what he wasn't. He wasn't providing justice even in his own family. Okay? He had gotten sloppy. I think he had gotten focused inward instead of on what was going on for the best of the people as a shepherd. He got into his own feelings, got into his own self. That's why the whole time, Joab had to have known that something was really wrong with the king, with Absalom, for him to be able to even pick up on that. To be able to try to get that thing brought back together and get Absalom brought back in. David's working from his inside his feelings, and he's not working for the good of the people. Okay? And so he's gotten sloppy. He's forgot those that are below him in the chain of command. Guess what? We got to be careful too. Okay? We have to be careful. Because it can become potentially, in this case, detrimental. Okay? If you forget about all those that are below you, because the farther you get up, the farther you get away from the chain, it can get kind of difficult. Okay? Now on the flip side, Joab is a great leader. Okay? As well. Thing is his vision was for his own plans though. See, David let God, most of the time, David let God. Joab let Joab. Okay? Joab had his own little plan going. Okay? He was into accumulating power under the constraints of what? The king and David. My guess is, since he's his nephew, if he wasn't there, he heard about the time that the prophet Samuel showed up at the door at Jesse's house and anointed David, his uncle, as future king. Joab never tries to overthrow David. Joab always uses what he's doing trying to build David up, because in process of doing that, he was building himself up. Joab was working with the king, but he was working with the king to build him and his little personal kingdom, his power. So he was accumulating power by knowing how to lead people. Okay? And he did it well. He knew how to keep his fighters on the field. He knew how to keep them moving forward. He was also knew how to give honor and respect to those that went into battle with him or for him. David failed on this occasion. He knew those that go into battle needed him to be on their side. Needed to be affirmed. And instead, David's where? David's off over there in his feelings. Okay? Son or not, doesn't matter. Okay? What do we do? Well, look, a little different, but the clients, you know what they're like. When they first get in here, they're coming off of a battlefield, aren't they? And who are you? You're the one that's kind of helping to what? Kind of lead them through that battle stage, right? Okay? You got to work with them. Okay? You got to work with them. Okay? But he worked inside the constraints that he had, but he was building his own thing. He was a great leader of men. His problem is, while he was a great leader, his character and integrity weren't. Joab was a dangerous guy. Okay? He was a dangerous man. See, a leader's just somebody that helps move people and the ball down the field. Okay? Whether the goal is good or bad doesn't change the fact on whether somebody's a good leader or not. It means that they have integrity or character issues if the outcome is toward evil. He's got a character issue. Okay? That's the reason why even one of his soldiers said, you know what, you'd have thrown me under the bus if I'd have killed him. But it come down to it. Okay? He's the type of guy, though, that would use revenge, even murder, to keep his position and his power that he's gotten. Because see, he's already killed Abner out of revenge, right? He's already killed Uriah for David, got no problem doing that. And then we're not going to read it, but right after this, David's going to put another guy in as commander because Joab needs to be slowed up a little bit. So he puts somebody else. You know what Joab does? Hey man, come over here. Stabs him and kills him. And then puts himself right back in as commander. The guy's not afraid to use violence at all. And David knows it. Okay? He's accumulated power. Okay? So his character's not exactly good. But he is a good leader of men. Not an example you go in his direction. But you can learn from a good leader and Well, he knew how to get people to follow. Okay? So, there's kind of a dichotomy here. He leads well, but he leads them in the wrong direction a lot of times. Joab does. Okay? Now, so learn from the side of, one thing is consequences. Okay? You can't exactly administer justice if you're doing the same things. Okay? And the consequences of those things can still follow. Well, actually, they will follow. Okay? Don't let things sit. If you don't know what to do, figure it out. Okay? Because they will then turn what? People against you just from inaction. And then when you look at this stuff from a leadership perspective, David's had some good moments. This is not David's good stuff. And Joab, bottom line, Joab's not exactly lovable, most godly man. But he does know how to keep his guys on the battlefield. As leaders, we have to be what? Ready for the battlefield. We have to make sure our most important assets are people. If you're staff, most important asset is staff. But when you're leading the clients, who's the most important asset to you? The clients. As executive director, who's your most important group? Your staff. You got to be there for your team. You got to be there for your staff. Okay? Because those are the ones going to battle with you. If you don't, what happens to the ones that go to battle with you? All of a sudden they look over and you're not on their team. They lose heart. You're wanting them to be able to what? Lead the clients. Your most important asset's your staff. Okay? If you're dealing with clients, your most important asset is the lives of those people. Okay? And if you lead them toward bad, guess what? It's on you. Okay? Joab's other thing was what? He was faithful to David, but he was only faithful to David because what? Of his own agenda. Check your agenda sometimes. Make sure it's on the same page. Well, you might be a good leader. You might be leading some people based on agendas. Okay? We got to be real careful that we're walking on God's agenda, not our agenda. Make sense? Okay. Thanks.